Well, I'm taking the leather off the base of the camera. So I started by removing the depth of field scale at the end here, and now I'm working my way down the leather. I'm scraping this back as I go because the leather's quite old. I'm concerned it'll completely delaminate and I'll end up tearing it if I don't take great pains to scrape it right back down at the level of the metal. It's stuck down pretty well. It's probable, I would say, that no one's been in here since the mid-30s, so it's getting on a bit. It's off. Oh, that's quite good. The tripod socket's one of the things that's of interest here. I was checking that the screws are tight. They are. There's no reason for me to delve in there because there's nothing to gain by it. I want to take the front door off in preparation to taking everything else out. So we've got a hinge screw here. And the slot in that screw is not particularly deep by the looks of it. So it is turning. I'll get that one started and I'll start the one at the top of the camera. That's turning too. Right, I'm going to collapse the bellows. Yeah, and this model, am I right in thinking that, yeah, there's a strong spring that acts on that door. So I don't want to have that flapping around loose. Just remove this screw and its mate. And that handy spudger I've got there, I'm just going to shove that down in here so that that spring on the door comes up against the spudger. It doesn't scratch off against that paint. Now to get the door off, I'm just going to stretch that out. The tags, the arms top and bottom here are quite thin. They're not very strong. It's no trouble at all to stretch those out. And this door, of course, I've got to see about this crappy paint. Let's have a little look at it. Does it come off? Yeah, it does. Now, that's paint over nickel plate. So this part was nickel plated, and the nickel plating we see here on the arms. But the rest, it was all nickel plated. And the paint has come away. Moisture's got under there, right down to that steel, because this is steel. So I've got to get rid of all of that loose paint. And make a decision about the rust. The rust is, it's only very fine surface rust. I mean, that's just lifting off as I scrape. So I want to clean all this surface. Interestingly, the brackets here don't appear to be anywhere near so bad. But I want to clear all this surface off, get that surface clean, and then I want to spray this with an etch primer, the black etch primer, and then a black shiny lacquer. And that'll just tidy that up. I mean, you don't see much of it. It's only when the camera's open and when it's on display that you'd see that, which is probably why this got rusty. So I'll pop that to one side. Let's have a look at the camera body here. Now I want the shutter off the front here, and then I want to remove the focus mount and the struts. I'm going to use this spanner to get the retaining ring loose. Hopefully it won't be much of a fight, but you never know. No, that went easily. So there's the shutter and lens assembly. The retainer ring, as you can see, is different to that used on the later Retinas. It's very shallow. It's probably a bit thicker in cross section. Basically the same thread size there. Pop that shutter to one side. I want to disassemble all of this. Now this is quite free running, and there's only one reason it would be quite free running at this late stage in its life, and that's that someone has had this apart and cleaned it and re-lubricated it. I think if I remove that stop screw I might be able to unscrew this completely. Let's have a look. Is that going to get us anywhere useful? Yep, that's us, we're out. Getting everything back in the correct place later will be entertaining. Now the focus mount here is held to the back of the front, held to the front standard with those 4 nickel plated screws. The bellows are held to the back of this focus mount, probably with screws from the inside. Yes, they are. Now I remembered correctly. Okay. I'll see if I can get to those screws first. I'd rather have this piece off so I can clean that thoroughly. No, it's just I'll undo these 4 screws. We'll get the struts out first, then I'll deal with the other. So by collapsing the struts, I'm not putting any load on them as I get my screws loose here. If I had the struts extended, those screws, everything would be under stress and the struts could get bent. Right, so the bellows just drop back in there with that focus mount piece attached. We've got 4 screws hold the struts into the body. We have 1 screw here, one screw in the same position at the base of the camera. That screw wasn't tight. It was deceptive because I was carefully scraping the glue and so forth from the slot so I could engage the screwdriver. It was never tight at all. Right, and two screws here in the film cassette chamber, and it looks like we'll get all four screws out without a fight. We will. That's a little bit unusual. And the struts should lift out now. Simple struts, there's no shutter release on here to worry about. Here's our body casting, and I've got to deal with that focus mount in a second. So I'm looking at the state of these struts. Now, you can see they splay out at this end. When this is held in the body, that's held firmly, and that has what that does is it forces these buttons outwards, which means that they engage with the notches in that front standard and pop up firmly into place, and that's working well. I'm looking at the state of these struts to see if there's any looseness there, any rattle. If that's held firmly, they seem pretty good. So this all needs to be cleaned because, as you can see, it's very dirty and greasy, and that grease is holding a lot of grit and rubbish. This piece I'd rather have off the bellows if I possibly can. So I've got to remove the four screws. You can see the thread of the screws here. The heads, of course, are on the inside of the bellows. So let's see if I can achieve that. There's one. Now, these screws don't appear to be rusty at all. They're unscrewing easily. And the big liability here, or the potential liability, is if you were to slip with your screwdriver and poke a hole in the bellows, then you'd have to patch it up. So I'm trying very hard to make sure that I can stay on that screw. The first two screws were very easy. That might have been to lull me into a false sense of security. That's three. Of course, it's not easy to see what's happening in the back of the camera because everything is matte black. Okay, I've got my four screws loose. Let's see if this plate will come off the front of the bellows. The little felt light trap washer's sticking there. Let me just see if I can get that loose. Yeah, it's not enthusiastic to come loose. They'll have to be glued back together. But it's off, that's the main thing. And here what I'm mostly concerned with is looking at the bellows to see if there are any punctures, whether they're gone at the corners in particular, where they're likely to go. So I've got to check that they're all light tight, which I'll do with a nice bright pen light. clean of course all that recess out, and this piece, our focus mount, needs to be clean. And I'm going to remove the last of that felt off there first before I start cleaning it, because that'll make it much easier. And you can see where that was glued on. There's 4 spots of glue around the outside there, and this is just very sticky with old grease. So there's a couple of generations of grease here, I would say, so someone's been in and had a go at it in more recent times. And when I say more recent times, that could easily have been 1950. And all of this will need to be cleaned. Now I'm going to separate these parts for cleaning. I've just marked the outer helical and the focus scale ring together there, so that I know where the focus scale ring goes back. Remove those 4 tiny screws. That's our focus scale ring loose. That'll have to be cleaned manually because of course it's got painted engravings. And here's the inner and outer helical. So what I want to do is check that I've got these in a state where I can put them back exactly as they came out. Normally you do that by, I do it anyway, by setting them at a point where the front surfaces are dead level. It's about there. Now I've put a little scratch mark on the outer helical in line with that focus scale ring. I'll just put a little mark on there, a V mark pointing towards that. So now I know how these 2 pieces fitted together. These don't even want to come apart, they're that gunked up at the ends of the threads. And means I can put them back where they came from. That's the long and the short of it. I started cleaning this front door up with a view to repainting it. Now the corrosion there is obviously it's on the steel. There's nickel plating over there too. So the corrosion is under the nickel plating, and the nickel plating is lifting away as a result. So the surface is not exactly dead smooth and flat. So it's going to take a little bit more work yet, but the basis of it's there. I've decided I'm going to remove the leather from the outside, much though I didn't really want to, because I want to bake the finish on this, and in order to bake the finish I really want the leather off, because it won't enjoy going in the oven at 70 degrees centigrade for half an hour or so. It's just not going to want to know about it. So I'm just going to have to remove this leather, which of course means I've got to carefully scrape underneath it to get it off the steel door. And I'm working around the 3 sides I can easily get to. It's not so easy to get under here because I can't get a good angle with my scalpel, but I can get these 3 sides. If I can get them loose, I might be able to work from the front and work right back to lift that leather off. The leather's stuck quite well. The adhesive certainly hasn't let go, which means that probably the corrosion under here is limited. As for the corrosion on the inside of the door, well, we know it's underneath the nickel plating. It's possible that the steel was never prepared particularly well prior to painting prior to the nickel plating process. That would certainly account for it. So it meant that the plating didn't bond well. I've got these three sides loose. Of course, I haven't got it loose here. I've got to get it back over that lever too. I'll just keep plodding away at this. The other parts are all in the ultrasonic cleaner now, so they're all ready for reassembly. Well, it's 5 minutes or so later. As you can see, I've made substantial progress at removing the leather. Some of it's stuck better than other bits. It appears to be stuck quite well right here. Alright, I'm over that corner now, and it should be easier to get down to that leather, get down to the bottom. I have replaced the leather on the front of a door before like this, and it's really tricky cutting it and getting it to size, because it has to effectively stretch on in order to lie down flush. Here we go. That's my front door leather off in one piece. That's a good result. As you can see, it was well stuck. That's the glue there that you can see. And you can see the nickel plating is quite good there. It's a shame it wasn't quite good here. Wouldn't have all that trouble. So I've got to get rid of all the excess rubbish from here if I can. So I want to clean the edges of all this door here, because I'll repaint that when I'm repainting this. There's no point painting half the door. I might as well paint the whole lot and be done with it. So I've got to get rid of all the stray bits of leather, because there's nothing surer than that if I don't, they will come adrift and then settle in the paint when I'm painting it. So I've got a lot more work cleaning this up to go. Well, here are the three pieces of that felt light trap to put back together. So I've got to choose the right way to place this. I don't think it'll be too tricky. Well, that's the glue sides. Obviously that was somewhere here. Perhaps there. That would certainly do. This face probably went there. I'm going by the holes that I can see in the felt there. They don't exactly line up with much. There's an extra set of holes, which probably means that they were punched in there originally, but they were not correct. Something like that. I'm fairly confident this side went to that side. like that. Yeah, I'll glue that back on until it looks relatively neat, and then I can start assembling things. The front door's away baking at the moment. Hopefully that'll come back looking pretty good. Well, there is it all stuck back together, and I can put this in place. And basically I'll reverse the order that I took things apart, I think, to get the screws through that hold the bellows to the back of the front standard. They've got to go in from the back here. None of those are going to be particularly easy to deal with. Because that felt will have moved, there's a reasonable chance that the holes won't line up particularly well, and I'll have to push this screw through the felt to get the screw started, which of course will be awkward. That's particularly awkward because you can't get on to the screws conveniently with your screwdriver perpendicular to the screw, because the opening at the back of the camera is not wide enough to allow that. So got to make sure that the edge of the bellows doesn't get caught by the screw, otherwise it could damage the bellows. Now, that screw just took off when I went to pick it up. I'll have to find that back shortly. No, it hadn't gone any significant distance at all. I've got 3 of the screws started, the last one's giving me grief. No, it's tightened up. So I'll just go around each 4 of the screws, and each of the 4 screws, and pull them up snug. That's it, I think. Yes. And you can see the thread on the screws just protruding through the front of the front standard there. A little bit of felt stuck to that screw where it had driven through it. That's good. That's a good result. Now the struts. As you can see, they came back from the cleaning looking very good. They're nice and clean, and they're not going to require any more than lubrication and putting back into the body shell. So I've just got to gather the screws together to do that.